Some of the best fieldcraft in World War II didn't come from manuals, training officers, or official equipment lists. It came from the men caught behind lines, cut off from supply, and forced to improvise their own survival tools from whatever they could scavenge. For the first minute of this guide, it's worth remembering that prisoners of war, downed airmen, isolated scouts and resistance fighters had to navigate forests, fields and mountains with no issued compass, no map and no guarantee of rescue. Losing one's bearings wasn't just inconvenient. It meant wandering into patrols, missing extraction points or dying in the wilderness. Many of these men had nothing but pocket debris, broken gear, snapped blades, stripped wire and leftover metal fragments. Out of this desperation came a forgotten trick. A functioning directional tool built from two pieces of metal, small enough to hide in a sleeve seam, yet accurate enough to point home. Now let's get into exactly how it worked and why it mattered. The improvised compass worked because magnetization could be created with nothing more than friction and ferrous scraps. Soldiers quickly learned that almost any piece of carbon steel could take on a magnetic charge. The principle was older than navigation itself. Iron particles align when stroked repeatedly in a single direction, especially if the contact is forceful and consistent. Men trapped behind enemy lines used nothing more than a razor fragment, a broken needle, a piece of shrapnel, or even a clipped section of a field ration can as their main directional needle. The second piece of metal served as the magnetizer. A scrap of steel, the end of a bayonet, or the edge of a mess tin lid could be used to repeatedly stroke the needle in one direction. This action gradually forced the microscopic domains inside the metal to align, giving the scrap an ability to point toward magnetic north when balanced correctly. It wasn't perfect, but perfect wasn't necessary. It was consistent, predictable, and life-saving. This trick didn't appear in issued manuals because the armies assumed men would never lose their compasses in the first place. Real war, of course, had other ideas. The directional tool worked in the field because the second component created the balance needed for orientation. Once the needle scrap was magnetized, soldiers needed a way for it to turn freely. The second metal scrap became a crude, but reliable pivot. When bent into a shallow U-shape, it formed a cradle. When flattened into a narrow strip, it became a balancing base. The key was reducing friction. Many men set the magnetized shard on a blade edge. Others placed it on a canteen lid rubbed smooth with sand. Some resistance fighters floated their magnetized metal on a drop of water inside a bottle cap, though this took a bit more time to set up and wasn't as discreet. The simplest version, the one that spread through POW camps and commando units, was the pivot scraper method. The magnetized metal was balanced over the thinnest sharp edge available. If the edge was too wide, soldiers ground it down with rocks until it worked. Once balanced, the magnetized scrap would settle, turn slightly, wobble, then align itself. It didn't spin with the elegance of a factory-made compass, but, its reliability surprised even trained navigators. This bushcraft compass gained value because it fit into situations where standard tools could not be carried. One of the most documented examples came from escape lines running through occupied France. Downed pilots often had every identifiable tool taken from them. But 2 harmless metal scraps? Those weren't confiscated. They didn't look like anything of value. Yet those scraps quietly guided airmen across the Pyrenees towards Spain. On the Eastern Front, Soviet partisans used variations of the same idea. A broken sewing needle magnetized on the butt plate of a rifle gave enough direction to maneuver through dense forest. In the Pacific, soldiers stranded after patrols used shrapnel from exploded shells, magnetized against their bayonet, floated in bamboo tubes filled with water. None of this appeared in equipment lists, but veteran accounts prove just how widely this quiet trick spread. Modern survivalists can, recreate this method with a few simple steps that require absolutely no specialized gear. Start with a ferrous object that's small enough to balance easily. A sewing needle usually works well, but so does the clipped edge of a steel soda can, or even a piece of discarded hardware. If possible, test it with a magnet beforehand, but if that's not an option, just remember that most high-carbon steels will take a charge. Take a second metal object and, run it along the needle from base to tip, always in the same direction. The repeated single-direction strokes cause alignment within the metal structure. After several minutes, the fragment should hold a weak magnetic field. If you have the opportunity, stroke it near the strongest metal you can find, like a blade spine or the back of a tool, which often increases magnetization efficiency. Create a balancing platform using the sharpest edge available. This could be a knife spine, the rim of a tin, or a pointed piece of metal. Set the magnetized scrap across it gently. Allow it to settle. It will rotate slightly and align with magnetic north. If wind is an issue, shield the setup with your body. If accuracy must be improved, repeat the magnetizing strokes for additional minutes. Another historical version involves floating the magnetized scrap on a small leaf placed on water. This gives more movement room, but requires time, still water, and space. Conditions soldiers didn't always have. Still, it remains a useful alternative today. The technique survived because it relied on physics no battlefield could disrupt. Armies confiscated compasses, maps, and radios. They couldn't confiscate knowledge. 2 scraps of metal were invisible as tools to anyone who didn't know the trick. Yet they quietly carved escape routes, guided night marches, helped partisans coordinate strikes, and gave isolated soldiers the one thing the war took from most men: orientation. This lost World War II trick endures today because it empowers anyone to turn common debris into a life-saving instrument. It is bushcraft reduced to its purest form: resourcefulness guided by understanding. If you value recovering forgotten wartime skills like this, make sure to subscribe and share. Keeping this knowledge alive ensures these simple, brilliant survival methods never disappear from the world's memory.